Hello, this is Bill Jones with recapturefederalism.com. Coming to you from Freedom's Nest. I always talk about Freedom's Nest. I haven't done a video where I've been on camera in quite some time. So welcome to Freedom's Nest. I laugh about it, chuckle about it. It's my office and studio and everything else. It's very small. It doesn't look that small on the video. And this is going to be episode number 4, I believe. Is it 5? One or the other. We'll have it on right when we put it on YouTube. And what's more important is what the title is and the subject is. It's the American Communist Tax System. Oh man. You can have the IRS after you, Bill. Well, they're after me anyway, so, you know, not specific. I have filed my taxes. I had some question a year or two ago. It turns out right when the deal was going on, you know, with the IRS. I'm going to get into that, too, on all their criminal activity. The IRS is a criminal organization. They adhere to the Communist Manifesto, and, you know, that's what I'm always talking about. Because that's the truth. And we're going to be talking about that. What we're going to be doing is relating that with treason, communism, the federal system of America, which is the way we're supposed to be operating. And we'll be explaining that, making references to sources and what have you. First thing I want to do, well, it'll be the second thing, but right now, like you seeing this, if you're not seeing it at recapturefederalism.com, if you go there, recapturefederalism.com, subscribe, I would appreciate it. Tell people about recapturefederalism.com. Have a lot of stuff. We're continuing with the mini documentaries, and we will continue on and on and on. And welcome back this time, and come back later. And if I can get my act together and we get you subscribed, and we'll be sending more notices out. I haven't been doing that because it's I'm trying to get the mini documentaries down to where I a little greater control on it that allows me enough time to do some other things, including the mailings and things of that sort. And I have said in the past, I'm working on setting up a membership page, and that'll be out into the future too. This is a mini documentary of an ongoing reality documentary series, several continuing ongoing mini documentaries, all concerning itself about those the things I just talked about: the Holy Bible, federal system of America, communism, people adhering to the Communist Manifesto. Now I go on. I always say my oath, and I, William R. Jones, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, so help me God. And as I always say, first time I took that oath was in 1965, July 1965. I joined the United States Navy. The enemy then was, even though it was more known then apparently, the enemy then was communism. It's communism now. It's people operating in the dark side, corruption. As I say, you can adhere to communism, and you don't even have to be a communist. You can do that. It's operating on the dark side, and we have a lot of people in the United States operating on the dark side. I want to get into right into it about the American Communist tax system. As I said, this is an episode which is part of the American Communist Theocracy, which is the title of the series. Treason, Sedition, and Subversion subtitle. them people who have an American communist theocracy, they got to have money to operate, money to make profits. They got to get money. How do they get their money to do their racketeering, to make it worthwhile to be corrupt? Profiteering. And so they have to tax. And taxes are more taxes. Some people say, argument in economics, that interest is a tax. Fees, penalties, like in Obamacare or Communist Care, those are all taxes. Some are indirect and some are direct. The founders talked about raising revenue because they knew it was necessary, especially in wartime. Get by with some fees and things of that. So if you don't have a large expenses, you can get by with very little. And of course, what we have when you have an American communist theocracy, you have a lot of expenses because you've come up with phony expenses. And you have to help your buds who are involved into the communist racketeering and profiteering. I'll mention some things, and I'll say later, because I'll be doing an extensive documentary on that particular subject. There was a gentleman, a Marine Major General by the name of Butler, who was retired. He was running for U.S. Senator for Pennsylvania in 1932, but in 1931 he wrote a book, like a lot of politicians do, or people running for office. They write a book. Marine Major General Butler had been awarded not one, but 2 Congressional Medal of Honors. He wrote a book in 1931 called War is a Racket. Well, I take off on that. I recommend reading it. It's not, you can get it online. There's no copyright on it. War is a Racket by General Butler. We're at war right now. There's communist people adhering to the Communist Manifesto in our government are levying war against us. Class warfare. That's what the communists do. And class warfare is a racket also. There's people making money on it. You don't think so? Just think about the trillions of dollars, gazillions of dollars, whatever it is. It's all relative. We get into that also, because that's part of the American communist tax system. Debt and credit. Debt and credit. And the communists use that, the Communist Manifesto and the Communist Guidelines from 1921 use all that, use that stuff, especially the manifesto where they specify it, and we'll be getting into that. Our government representatives, executive branch, Supreme Court justices, and the judiciary overall, they have obligations. People have rights, and then there's obligations. We, the people, have rights and obligations. And of course, there's been massive usurpation of all our rights. Some specified, some are inherent, some are inherent that are specified. A lot of rights. The right to survive, for instance, is a basic right. And that's not specified anywhere. Or is it? Let me get my little book out here. I got my little Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States from Hillsdale College. Thank you, Hillsdale College. Compliments of them. Wonderful people. And I want to read something. People don't talk about a lot of the stuff I talk about. People don't. It's in the Constitution. Federalist Papers, and other things. Don't talk about it. I don't talk about a lot of this. 85 Federalist Papers, and I key in on a couple of them. But there's Constitution, state constitutions. We're a compound republic, and hardly anybody ever talks about the preamble to the Constitution. You know, there's obligations here. This is what there's the governed and the governing, and the governing has obligations, and it's right in here. We have obligations too, as the people. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States. Now understand, words have meanings. It's the Constitution of the United States, and they get down at the end of the preamble and it says it's for the United States. Who's it for? Well, it's for we, the people. The obligation that we, the people, have is we ought to be keeping these people in line because for their obligations, because they ain't following these obligations. They've been usurping rights. They've been ignoring their obligations. Just look at that. We want a more perfect union, which is the Confederation, by the way, as specified in Federalist 51. Establish justice. Well, we've had justice, but are we getting justice now? No. They've set up special secret courts. They got group rights now. We're not supposed to have group rights. We're all supposed to be equal protection of the law. That's the justice. We don't have that. Ensure domestic tranquility. Do you think we got domestic tranquility going on? Not even close. It's got worse and worse and worse. And the communists are good, and those that adhere to the communists, you know, I would always say, it's a generic term, because it's shorter than totalitarian, and I have trouble spelling totalitarian, so it's communist, okay? It's a generic term. Doesn't mean that somebody belongs directly to the Communist Party and got a number and all that kind of stuff. But if they're adhering to it, they're levying war. If they're adhering to the Communist Manifesto, I consider them communist. If they're useful idiots, I consider them communist because they're following it. Well, in the Communist Manifesto, they talk about class warfare all the time, class struggle, propaganda, and agitation. There's no tranquility because they're adhering to the Communist Manifesto, which is treason. Article 3, Section 3. Now, we go with common defense. That's general terms. You should be working for a common defense. Do we have a common defense? We're loaded with gangs all over this country that are considered, there's a legislative finding in Illinois a couple of years ago. Street gangs is terrorism. That's right. That's what their finding was. So is that domestic tranquility? I don't think so. Where's the common defense? We got the mayor of Chicago running for re-election. Is he getting rid of the gangs? All these gangs? The ratio in Chicago is 10-to-1. Gangbangers, members of gangs, to the number of sworn officers of the city of Chicago. That's not common defense. Somebody dropping the ball, aren't they? And securing the blessings of liberty, or promote the general welfare. General welfare. That's not welfare or handing out welfare to groups, certain groups, taken from one redistribution of wealth. That's violating your obligation. You're supposed to be treating people fairly and evenly. You're not supposed to be treating the citizens as slaves. And that's where we get into the American communist tax system. Secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish. secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And what happened to the liberty? Slaves don't have much liberty, do they? No, they don't have any at all. And that's what's happened. You've got a national debt. You've enslaved my grandchildren. I've got 6 grandchildren. You have enslaved them. Yeah. And we'll get in there specifically. That's communism. I'm going to show you where that's at too. So that's the obligations. I want to talk about, I took my notes here, my storyboard for this video, because next in line is Article 6. Nobody hardly ever talks about Article 6 either. They'll mention supreme laws of the land. Article 6. It's the Supremacy Clause. Supremacy Clause, Article 6. First, there's 3 paragraphs. First paragraph, it was taking the debts over from the Articles of Confederation. Okay, that's all done with way back when they ratified. Then there, yeah, I'm getting a little bit of water here. Then they, second paragraph is the supremacy paragraph, and this Constitution, the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuant thereof, and all treaties made, remember that, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land and the judges of every state, and shall be bound, that's a legal word, shall be bound thereby, and anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Oh, this is just loaded. This is just loaded. I did a whole presentation probably about a year ago just on Article 6. And I went word for word on Article 6. And I'm not going to go back through word for word, but it's under the authority. And where does authority come from? In the Declaration of Independence, it tells where the authority came from for declaring the Declaration of Independence, and it is the same authority for the Constitution. And that's the good people of the United States. The good, honest, law-abiding citizens. The good people. They declared independence for the states. By the way, political parties in the United States do not have any legal basis or authority. So all these laws and regulations that are being passed they're not really legal, because the political parties are making the laws and the rules. The Communist Democratic Party, both of them. Then we shall be supreme law of the land. Well, if they don't have authority, it probably isn't, but they've been getting by in the confidence game here. It's all a corrupt confidence game. It's a shell game. They have people believing that they have authority. And if we go on, that's bad enough, okay? And that's really bad, because that's down to the basis of our country. But there was a time where they weren't all that corrupt, and like they are now, and they haven't gone all the way over to communism way back when, probably over 100 years ago, prior to 1895, and I'll get into that in a second. They were bound, and they tried being bound, and they tried doing stuff, and they tried getting around the Constitution. Supreme Court slapped him down in 1895 as far as direct taxes. Told him you can't do that. And then they came up with a treasonable act, I believe, a couple of them right in a row, combined. The 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve System. Again, not going to get into detail. Those are separate mini documentaries I'm going to be doing. Got a lot of stuff to do documentaries on. But bound, what does bound mean? It's a legal term. It's bound. You're bound. It is a legal and moral obligation. I just talked about obligations. They have the representatives, the judges, all your sworn people taking oaths, especially them, are obligated. What are they obligated to? They're obligated to their oath. Because in the next paragraph is the religion paragraph. Yes, there is a religion clause in the U.S. Constitution, Article 6. And let me quick read that. The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound, there's the word again, bound, legal and moral obligation, by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as qualification to any office or public trust. Remember public trust, very good, 2 words, very important. The opposite of public trust is political corruption, by the way, under the United States. Okay, public trust under the United States. For instance, Bill Clinton, when he perjured himself, he violated public trust. Richard Nixon. For you young kids, you know, somebody under 55 or so, probably don't remember too much about Richard Nixon. I remember. He was my president when I was over in Vietnam. Yeah. Violated the public trust. I am not a crook. They're all crooks. And so you're bound to oath and no religious test. Well, I consider and I can prove that the communism is religion. And you got people adhering to the Communist Manifesto. They're adhering to the Communist Manifesto, the Communist Confession of Faith. Okay. Now, that's Article 6. They're violent. They're not in compliance with any of that. So you end up with laws. They treat regulations as if they were laws, and they're not. They're regulations. They're supposed to be based on a legitimate law. And I said most of their laws are illegitimate because they're non-compliance. They're not adhering to their oath. They're adhering to the Communist Manifesto, and the supreme law of the land that's supposed to be there is illegitimate. Okay? Now, we will get into, and then you have a 10th Amendment, which is, of course, they're violating it all over, and that's everything not specified is supposed to be done by the state. Well, yeah, they don't follow that either. There's a usurpation of people say the state's rights. That annoys me when I hear that, because that's not really true, because the states are we the people also. So it's really the people of the states. That's who the rights belong to. And it's all the individuals of that state have those equal protection of the law, have the same rights, inherent rights. Everybody has those inherent rights. We all have inherent rights. All of us. We have the rights. Now, then there's the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment. Bill, why are you bringing up the 13th Amendment? That doesn't apply to you. That's just applying to Emancipation Proclamation. No, it applies to everybody. It applies to everybody. If I can find it. Well, here we go. I gotta find it. These pages are sticking together or something, aren't they? 13th. Yeah, here we are. Get to the right page, Bill. Here we are. Amendment 13, ratified December 6, 1865. Somebody thinks it has to do with the Civil War. It does not. Because of that, they came out with it after Emancipation Proclamation. And what it's really for is everybody in the United States. Because what does it say? Amendment 13, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or place subject to their jurisdiction. So you can't have, except by imprisonment for a crime, you cannot have slavery or involuntary servitude. Okay? Well, our tax system puts an involuntary servitude on everybody. We are enslaved by it. We are enslaved by the tax code. We are enslaved by regulations throughout the government and all these phony departments that we have at federal level, and because of phony representatives, both elected, appointed, violating their oaths. We had way back when, before I get on the communist side, there was a thing. It was 18 states. This is for the benefit, for memory of the older people, and for the younger people. In 18 states, there were usury laws. Back in the 1970s, we had a lot of inflation. There were usury laws in 18 states. Usury laws, by the way, that comes from a religious theologian, St. Thomas Aquinas. Studies on it regarding the Bible and biblical law and God's law with interest, and felt that excessive interest and taxes, because interest is a tax, that there should be limitations on it. So you end up with, if there's no limitations on it, you end up with people like the mafioso with juice loans, and that's what the excessive loans are. We have right now, we have that. They did away, and the usury laws were nullified, and I believe by a treasonable act, by the decision in 1978, Marquette National Bank of Minneapolis versus the First Omaha Credit Service, and they in effect nullified state usury laws. They said it was the function of the national legislature, Congress, to set interest rates. Boy, did that open up a can of worms, didn't it? Did they set the interest rates? No, they have a treasonable body, the Federal Reserve, is setting rates. And they got zero rates that they're going to give you the money you have in the bank, and they allow people like MasterCard, department stores, private, the national banks and national bankers, extensions of them through credit to department stores and have it, at excessive rates with fees and punishments and all those things. There is no more protection. There are no more usury laws to be to protection. Look at the spread on that. you have, they're giving out almost nothing on a savings account from the nationalist banks. And nationalist banks. We'll get into the Communist Manifesto on that too. And they, how do I word this without getting into trouble? They got juice loans. They're giving out nothing from the national banks. And what are they taking in? Whether 15, 16, 18, by the time you get fees and what have you, it's up 30%. Vito and the mafioso would be proud to be getting that kind of money, but no, he's in jail because he can't do it, but the national banks are, and Visa and MasterCard and the other financial companies that are doing it. I might just make a note. You need to check out and find out who is a major stockholder in MasterCard and Visa. Okay. Has in the past, I don't know what the position is right today, but it's been major in the past. Warren Buffett. Who's in tight with? He's an insider, you know, he's an insider. I've often wondered, I've been trying and doing some investigation and have not found out who First Omaha Credit Service was. But First Credit, Omaha, that's where Warren Buffett's at. Whether he was involved or not, I have no idea. I suspect somehow he was involved, but I don't know. I have no idea. So I would never make that accusation. But I know he's a big, you know, Berkshire Hathaway is a big holder of stock in Visa and MasterCard. And they're doing fairly well, ain't they, with their excessive credit loans and what have you. And it helps to be a special interest, doesn't it, in the United States? That's interest. That's a form of taxation. Outrageous. Outrageous. Now, let me get some of my books here, because I'm going to go on to the other side. You know, we got talked about, you know, slavery, laws and fees and interest, and that's all slavery, indentured servitude is what that is. And it's not only up to us individually, to me and you right now. It's to your kids, to your grandkids, posterity. Where's the obligation? Somebody not doing their job, are they? Not doing their job. I got to go here. Let me see. Page 86, page 26, there ain't 86 pages in there. It's like 68 pages of the Manifesto. Let me go page 26 if I can find it here. And nope, here we go. I'm going to read one quote that I always make, just the one sentence I'm going to read. But communism abolishes eternal truth and abolishes all religion and all morality. And that's just one part of one sentence. Very important. They abolishes eternal truth. Eternal truth. That's right. It abolishes all religion. Yeah. They abolish God and Jesus Christ. And all morality. So, you know, when you act like Vito and excessive juice loans, it's immoral. But you see, the communists and those that adhere to the communists don't make any difference because they've already abolished morality. They can do what the F they want. Page 26, you've heard of the 10 planks. The 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto is on page 26. And if I can find... and it's based off of, in 1847, Frederick Engels did the Communist Confession of Faith. And by the way, one of them says, you talk about tax system, why they tax 100%. Question 3 of the Communist Confession of Faith is, how do you wish to achieve this aim, and that aim is the aim of communist? The answer is by the elimination of private property and the replacement by community of property. That is their aim. They want to take all your property, and they're doing it by taxes and credit and debt. That's how they do it, okay? And they even talk about that because they have in question, if I can find it, question 18, once they establish a democracy, which we are not a pure democracy, we're a republic, a compound republic within the umbrella of a confederation. Federalist 51. They have an answer here, number 1, and then they got 3. 3 would have to do with Common Core and education, but I'm not going to get into that. It's going to be a whole separate deal. 1. By limiting private property in such a way that it gradually prepares a way for its transformation into social property, e.g. by progressive taxation, limitation of a right inherence in favor of the state, etc., etc. Progressive tax. You know, I listen to Glenn Beck, and he's always, this is the thing that irritates me from Mr. Beck. And I like Mr. Beck. Mr. Beck is a product of CNN and Fox News. You don't ever hear him talking about communism. But he talks about progressivism and progressives. They're communist. Okay? Right here, talking about it. Progressive taxation, that's what it's all about. Now that was on page 40. Let me go back to page 26 because the Communist Confession of Faith was 1847. It was incorporated in there and it's listed as that. But they talk about on page 26 the 10 planks. And a lot of people have heard the 10 planks. That's not all there is. There's more to that, and I'll get into that in a second here. But the 10 planks. And let's look at some of it, how much taxes and regulations that they're enslaving people with these 10 planks. 1. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Bureau of Land Management. No, that's what it was happening out there with the folks out there in Nevada, wasn't it? There used to be, they're down to 1 rancher left. We all know who he is. Mr. Bundy and the Bundy family. They're down to the last one. There used to be 50 ranches out there. All that property seized and now is part of the public purposes now. And there's federal rents on property, isn't there? Somebody wants to go in there and drill for some oil, you got to pay the gov. Of course, you ain't going to pay those old ranchers because those old ranchers are long gone, aren't they? Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Here we go again. That's plank 2. A heavy progressive and graduated income tax. Yeah, there we are. We have a debt that has to be paid off by your grandkids and my grandkids. And I got news for you. They ain't going to pay them off either, because it'll be into the next generation after that and generation after that, unless we do something about it. The criminals in government, look what they're doing. Communist criminal class. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. So we talk about inheritance all the time. The death tax. Yeah, it's all part of the planks. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. That's not with an I, that's with an E. That's the outgoing people. And they try and seize all the property when you're leaving the United States. That's why they're watching. And rebels, and rebels, that's what they consider rebels. Page 31, they consider conservative rebels. They consider everybody a rebel who does not support communism. Okay? That's in the guidelines of the Communist Party. So if you go out, like this, who was it, Facebook, when they went public, one of the founders there, he's originally from Brazil. He went to school with what's-his-face. And he's over in Indonesia or somewhere over Singapore. He's over there, denounced his. And Charlie Schumer, he went bananas. He's taking all his money going overseas. That's not right. We should take all his money. And they try and do that when you leave. They try and take all your money. 5. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. The nationalization of our banking system in 1978. Okay? That was all part of that. I remember, I'm old enough, I remember, I'm doing business with the same bank, they got different names of course, same bank that when I came back from Vietnam, got out of the Navy, I opened up a bank account with, it was in the village of Worth, Illinois, Worth State Bank. And it was Worth State Bank all the way into the 70s, late 70s, into the 80s. Then next thing you know, it was Worth Bank and Trust. And then later on, it was part, and then banks can only do business within their own state, regular state banks. And they were regulated by the state, individuals, several states. And they had the limitations on the interest. I think Illinois was up. They were high. Illinois, usury law was 12%. Can you imagine? I'd love to have a credit card with 12% nowadays. Yeah, 12%, open-ended 12%. Everybody tried to get a credit card out of Arkansas because Arkansas was one of those states. 9%. Their limit was 9%. You couldn't charge more than 9%. When they, with taxes and fees and everything else now, what's the rate up there? Some places it's up over 30% with penalties. Yeah. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of the national bank. And there you go. That 1978 decision, in my opinion, and I believe I can prove it, was a treasonable act. It's another one. All of them. A lot of them. And then in 6, we have the centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. We're talking the federal state. When they say state, they mean the federal state. They ain't talking about the individual republics in the United States, okay? Where's it? Amtrak. I'm old enough, I remember them. There were individual railroads had their transportation passenger service. Oh, under Tricky Dicky Nixon and the Democratic Congress at the time, Amtrak. Yep. Along with a lot of other things. He was a communist president, by the way, pro-communist, as was FDR, heavy duty. Nixon was as big pro-communist as FDR was. And now, of course, you've got Obama, super commie, and just like his daddy, and they're pro-communist also, along with all the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party, that's the way they operate. Democracy and pure democracy, blah, blah, blah. Then we have 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. See, they own everything. So there's your debt and your credit and everything else. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. And this, of course, was written back in the 1840s. But there's your EPA. That's the basis for the EPA. It's from one of the planks in the Communist 10 planks. 8, equal liability of all work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. What kind of industrial armies we got for agriculture? They come across the Mexican border. Yep, that's what we got. That's the industrial agriculture market there. Illegal aliens, that's what they've been doing. Yep, went from green cards to open-ended, give them everything. Okay? Been going on 30, 40 years. Okay? 9, the combination of agriculture and manufacturing industry, gradual abolition of all distinction between town and country by more equitable distribution of a populace over the country. not only redistribution of wealth, but they want to redistribute a redistribution of the population. It's called population control. By the way, I will just mention this in passing because I'm going to do a whole thing. I mentioned this last documentary I had, is the pro-communist information censorship at Wikipedia. They eliminated a category where they had stuff, and I've got proof. I've got screen captures on all this stuff. So what I'm going to tell you, I've got evidence of what I'm saying. Used to be a human population control movement. You cannot, if you Google that, it will redirect you to human population control, period, and not a movement. Well, that movement's a communist movement. That's the way it was. And guess what? They've changed a bunch of stuff on there. Yes, yes, yes. It has to do with immigration and everything. But I'll do another one on that, okay? I'm going to do more on that. And number 10, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. Oh boy. There's your Common Core, but Common Core is just another in the line of it. This free community college, I mentioned this the last documentary I had, that is a treasonable act. It is a violation of the equal protection of the law. You're only going to give the benefit to some people, and yet you're taking it from all the individual people through taxes, and that's part of the American communist tax system. Now, let me go. I like to read this 34 because, you know, we have this movement here to where there was no direct taxes. Now we got direct taxes, and they don't even follow the 16. And so whenever I get into that in detail, I'll show you where they violate their own amendment. And finally, they labor everywhere for the union and the agreement of democratic parties of all countries. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at the communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. First of all, the proletariat, along with everybody else in this country, is enslaved and is in chains. Okay. Along with children who haven't even been born yet. If they don't get eliminated before they come out of the womb, that's part of a population control movement also. Was abortion, still is. What about that? That's loss of taxes too, by the way. Population control. When you control the population, you eliminate some of those taxes, taking people off the tax rolls. Now, let me go. There's another section I want to go. They had the 10 planks, and then they go further on. They elaborated on the draft of the Communist Confession of Faith from 1847. Marx didn't like what Engels, or he may have liked what Engels did, but Engels wasn't good enough, and he felt it should be expanded, and they expanded it in 1848. Now, there is on page 54, I believe. Nope. Nope, 49. There's a question. They have these questions and answers, and the question they have is question 18. What will be the course of this revolution? I already told you that they have a forcible overthrow of governments. There's a revolution going on. It has been going on since 1848 for all over the world, because communists don't recognize countries. You know, there's no such thing, or nationalities. What will be the course of this revolution? And, you know, they got blah, 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 and they go down. And this is like, let me see how many total. They got a screwed up numbering system. They have a total of 12. So it's an expansion of the 10 planks, and this is how they then list the course of this revolution. A limitation of private property through progressive taxation, heavy inheritance taxes, abolition of inheritance through collateral lines, brothers, nephews, etc., forced loans. Forced loans. That is the national debt. The national debt is forced loans. They have put forced loans on your grandchildren and my grandchildren. And we allowed it to happen. They just bring it on through. Trillions and trillions of dollars, forced loan. And of course they talk about, not as forced loans, oh, the national debt. Stuff is necessary to keep going, and we got to do this. And pure communism, pure slavery, communist slavery. All those tax regulations, all the regulations all over, they got to be paid for. You got to pay for the slavery, and the slaves pay for their own slavery, because people make money off of that slavery. It's an economic system, just like it was in the old days on the cotton plantations. It's the same thing, and it's the same people doing it, the Democrat Party. Then we go on to the next one, gradual expropriation of landowners, industrials, railroad magnates, ship owners, partially through competition by state industry, partially through compensation in the form of bonds. They are big on the bond deals. And what do we got going with the Federal Reserve? Buying and selling bonds. And let me go 1 second here. Need to get me a drink of water. All this talking, this is hard work. I've gotten to a point, I chuckle about that, because I'm having fun doing this. At first, and I've been anti-communist for 50 years. I used to let it just bother me. And I said, yeah, I ain't going to let it bother me. No, I'm going to get in their face. Because they're control freaks, and that's what you do to control freaks. You get in their face. Because basically control freaks are cowards. You notice none of them commie-loving people. Nah, they weren't with me when I was over there in the talk and go. Oh, no. They're cowards. Yeah. Like most criminals, they're cowards. No integrity. Confiscation of possessions of all immigrants and rebels. Again, that's what E, the outgoing people, not the immigrants. Okay. They ain't seizing nothing from them. They're giving them everything. Okay. Outgoing, if somebody's and the rebels. Oh, God. And rebels, when they consider the rebels. Tea Party people are considered rebels by them. They're the enemy to the communist. Now, we may consider the communists, adhering to the communists, as being revolutionaries, and they are, but it's whose ass is going. Confiscation again of the possessions of all immigrants and rebels against the majority of the people. There you go with your democracy. That's not us. That's not our republic government. Our Republican principles. No, that's not representative. They're saying the majority, and they say what the majority is. The majority is communist. They don't count anybody else, so obviously it's the majority is a communist. Organization of labor and employment of proletarians on publicly owned lands and factories, workshops, with competition among the workers being abolished, and with factory owners, insofar as they still exist, being obligated to pay the same high wages as those paid by the state. What was that law? Something Bacon law. You got to pay the union wages. Yeah. What a bunch of phonies. Criminals, criminals, criminals. And here you go. They lie a lot. They use terms, you know, bailout. There's no such thing as a bailout. What a bailout is, in truth, is a nationalization. General Motors was a nationalization of a private company. The administration took the case, just stripped it out, usurpation of the judiciary obligations, took it right out of the courts, and nationalized General Motors. They nationalized the banks. It's all planned. They passed two laws in 1999-2000. The one in 1999, part of it abolished the Glass-Steagall Act, repealed it, abolished it. Drove us back to the Depression in 1933, the bank laws. That's what Glass-Steagall was. The laws that they passed gave you all these derivatives, all these mortgage vehicles, phony stuff that was gonna fail, would fail. It was one big plan that gave you the financial crisis and the financial chaos, communist chaos. It's all planned by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party combined. And the Republican Party, as I say, they're all operating on the dark side. They're a Democratic Party, also with a Republican name. And we continue. An equal obligation on all members of society to work until such time as the private property has been completely abolished. Formation of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Where do you think the money's coming for that? You got to have money for all this stuff. And who's making the profits? You have the communist, racketeering, and profiteering. Okay? Now here you go. Here you go, this next one. Listen very closely. It has directly related to the American communist tax system. Listen up closely. Centralization of money and credit in the hands of the state through a national bank with state capital, and the suppression of all private banks and bankers. You remember I was talking about the state banks? There you go. By the way, some of you older people might remember. Young people know when I'm going to say something and you're going to say, what is that? I don't know what you're talking about. You've been brainwashed so much you think it's normal. At one time we had savings and loans and a lot of credit unions. We still got some credit unions, but we had savings and loans. That entire industry is gone. It's been gobbled up by the banks. I look at some of the Tallman Federal Savings and Loan. Well, it was Tallman Savings and Loan to start out with here in Chicago. Several branches for years and years and years, going back to Depression. It's sort of like the Jimmy Stewart deal with It's a Wonderful Life. That's what the Tallman was like. Tallman family. The family-owned savings and loan, a lot of them were. And where are they gone? They're gone. Why are they gone? And right here, communism. Sure. Suppression of all private banks and bankers. They're gone. The communist representatives took them over. Increasing the number of national factories, workshops, railroad ships, bringing the lands into cultivation, improvement of the land already under cultivation, EPA, farm subsidies, the corporation. Oh no, it doesn't say that, but that's what it means. all in the proportion to the growth of capital and labor force at the disposal of the nation. Taxes. That taxes are going to pay for all that stuff. Pay the corporations, communist, racketeering, and profiteering. And education of all children from the moment they leave their mother's care in the national establishments at national cost. Tax, 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 regulation, 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 tax, 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 tax. Education and production together, whatever, you know. Whether they might not or might not do that. They don't need to do it. If everything's owned by the state, it sure is, isn't it? National establishments at national cost. Community college for some. Common Core, that's what it all is. And Glenn Beck, I wish you'd talk about all of that. No, you write a book about Common Core. Yeah. You get what we expect, I guess. And well, that wasn't the end of it. We got a couple more. Construction on public lands of great palaces as communal dwellings for associated groups of citizens engaged both in industry and agriculture, combining in their way of life the advantages of urban and rural conditions while avoiding the one-sidedness and drawbacks of each. Federal Housing Authority, 1949, that's what that is. That's what that is. FHA. Federal housing, you know, the warehouse housing, then they tear them down. And who profited off of that 1949? There were people, special interest builders, big companies who paid a lot in kickbacks and lobbying and what have you to get them into contributions into the campaigns. Political corruption. They got benefits by building them big old buildings. And then what happened in Chicago, what happened was they had to tear them down because they were in effect quartering of the communist soldiers, the street gangs in those buildings. They started out, they weren't as bad. They were very selective at who they brought in. They were legitimate people who needed help. But it didn't end up that way. Then you have destruction of all unhealthy and jury-built dwellings in urban districts, and that's the FHA I was talking about, the 1949 Federal Housing Act. Then we have equal inherent rights for children born in and out of wedlock. There's your destruction. There is your destruction of the traditional marriage and the traditional family. Bill O'Reilly's always talking on his, spin-free zone, which isn't so much spin-free, I guess, I don't know, that he talks about, and he, rightfully so, he talks about single parent families and the destruction of the families. But he never mentions the word communism. That's right in here, page 50, okay? That's what you're talking about, taking care of, some of these women not married, having 4, 5, 6, 7 children to make a profit. And then the last one is concentration of all means of transportation in the hands of the nation. And that's what you have with, I was in trucking for years. That's what you have in trucking. And they control everything through regulations. And they try a lot of this stuff, safety, and then they come out, deregulation, lies. When deregulation, it was never deregulation. There's no such thing as communist-inspired government to be deregulating anything. It's only re-regulating and expansion of regulations, and that's what it is. There is, if you go online, there is a document you can find. If you Google Jefferson's opinion of banks from, I want to say 1791. I don't have it right in front of me, I do not think. Maybe I do in my paperwork. Yeah, I do here. Look at that. How about that? I have a note right here. 1791. Jefferson's opinion on constitutionality of a national bank. And he writes there, and all, I'm not going to go through it all, but you can Google that sometime. Or there's another great site. You can do a little bit of homework on yourself, for yourself. And I recommend that for everybody. That's what I've done over the last 50 years. To understand this stuff and see how they're screwing you and what they're doing and how they're screwing your kids and your grandkids. Okay. Jefferson's opinion on it. And one of them, number 7, to give them the sole and exclusive right of banking under national authority and so far as against the laws of monopoly. And that's what's happened. That's what the Federal Reserve is, isn't it? All the member banks in the Federal Reserve. They clean it up, ain't they? They making some money. The bailout? No, that was a nationalization. So, you know, it's what you get. He told, you know, we have these founders, all of them. They all got together and they were all well self-taught, most of them. And they gave us so much. We're we're letting it go to waste by not standing up. We have the laws on our side. I want you to, one last thing as I leave. I feel it's an obligation. I'm bringing up all this stuff that's bad, okay? But there are solutions. We have solutions. We have a wonderful, wonderful system that's being destroyed. The system is on the side of the free citizens class. Laws favor us. And there's 4 ways to petition. I'm going to get into that too. But there are solutions to our problems. But we need to speak up. We need to become active. We need to be nonviolent, because the minute you get violent, they'll get violent back, and that will be their justification. I want to do, before I leave, there's one more thing I want to talk about. I noticed it on my screen over here, and I want to talk about something. You got the IRS, and we know what the IRS has done. I'm going to go back into history. The first constitution of the state Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as it's known. I want to read something to you. I want to show you something. Show you how illegal the IRS is, how illegal the Department of Homeland Security is, and how illegal some of the operations are of the Department of Justice. Most of this stuff is treasonable. That's how bad it is. It's such a heinous crime, and if convicted, shall suffer death. We have, of course, July 4th, 1776. Okay? And we have a Declaration of Independence that day. When they were done with that, of course, they had the ratification going around. But in Pennsylvania, the people of Pennsylvania had their constitutional convention. The president of that convention was a guy, some dude you might have heard of, Ben Franklin. He was the president. And on September 28th, 1776, they came out with the Constitution, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, state of Pennsylvania. In number 3, section 3, and it reads that the people of this state shall have the sole and exclusive and inherent right of governing and regulating the internal police of the same, which means the state. Okay? That is an inherent right, and that's an inherent right for everybody breathing in this country. Okay? There is no authority or legal basis for the IRS, for the Department of Homeland Security. They're all communist organizations. Just got through reading all those things that they do in the American communist tax system. Where do you think the tax money is going? Into these illegal agencies and departments. The exclusive and inherent right of governing and regulating the internal police are the same. The IRS does not have right to go into the individual states arresting people. What should happen is that they want to talk to somebody, they need to go into the courts in that state, requesting a search warrant, arrest warrant, and then having the local police do it. That's correct. That's how it's supposed to be done. It's not being done because you have the IRS and the Department of Homeland Security. They're essentially stalkers, aren't they? You have control people. What happens to a wife beater? The wife at some point, hopefully, says, I'm out of here, I'm gone. And what does that husband normally do? He threatens. He's going to cut money off, cut the kids off, get control of the kids, threatens, and has the woman trembling, just like the communists want all of us to tremble. Then he goes stalking, doesn't he? Go looking for her. He wants to do harm to him. Isn't that what the IRS and these other? Yeah, they're not but control freaks. And with that, I'm going to shut it down for the day. And in this mini documentary, we're going to have another one soon. Again, if you would, come on to my site, recapturefederalism.com, and come to the site, take a look and see what we have, and subscribe. And we're going to be issuing and doing more later on. And until next time, have a nice day.